Chapter 2, The Suffering Queen. Victoria was beating desperately the door of her bedroom, from within, and screaming almost hysterical, crying disconsolately, her beautiful face bathed in tears and displaying a gesture of infinite anguish. "Let me out! Please let me out! What happened to Lord Melbourne? Is Lord Melbourne all right? I need to see it. I want to see Lord Melbourne. Take me with him. Lord M. Lord M. Shouted Victoria, almost pleading, and then she dropped to her knees, her arms sliding through the door and resting her head on it. "Lord M. Melbourne, I need you. Take me with him, please." The two soldiers of the Royal Guard standing outside on the other side of the door stood unmoved, but their faces showed some tension, and from time to time exchanged glances of disgust, and suddenly they were alert when they heard the footsteps of people approaching. They held their rifles, ready for any eventuality, but those who were hurrying along were Baroness Lazen, Victoria's former governess and head of her house, and Miss Scarrat, Victoria's maid. They both stopped before the guards, who were standing in their way. "I'm sorry, madam, but we cannot," began one of the guards. "What right do you enclose the Queen of England?" Baroness Lazen was furious. "Baroness, we only obey orders." The same guard tried to explain. "You order? Whose orders?" asked Lazen. "Lazen, is it you? Tell them to let me out. Take me to Lord Melbourne," cried Victoria, through the door. "You heard," Lazen told them authoritatively. "But, madam, we must await orders from the commander of the guard, to be sure that the Queen is safe and there are no other attackers in the palace," replied the other guard. "English-ish Essel. English donkeys," Baroness Lazen said in her native language, the German language. "Sorry?" asked the soldier. "Have you checked if the Queen is injured? Have you checked under her clothes?" Lazen asked in harsh reprimand. "Of course not." The guards responded scandalized, almost in unison. "Well, it is necessary to undress her to know if she is injured. Her maid and I have to undress her to know that she is not hurt, and we must calm her, because she can get sick from the nerves. Nobody thought that they should call us immediately to verify that the Queen has not been hurt," bellowed Lazen. "Baroness, but as far as we know, only Lord Melbourne received the shots," replied the first soldier who had spoken to Lazen. Victoria, who had heard through the door, gave a cry of pain that seems more like the pitiful wail of a wounded animal, and startled everyone. "Trottle! Idiot!" exclaimed Lazen in German, "let us pass, the Queen needs help. If the Queen is injured and no one has noticed, many will pay dearly." Lazen cried, her face very tense, with concern in her damp eyes, distressed by the Queen who loved as her daughter. The guards stepped aside, and Lazen opened the door and Victoria threw herself into her arms, crying. The Baroness hugged Victoria and gently pushed her back a few paces as Scarrat stepped in behind her and closed the bedroom door, leaving the three women alone. "Your Majesty, are you all right? Are not you hurt?" asked Lazen, very worried as she pulled Victoria away a little to see her, and fixing her anguished sight on the blood stains on the Queen's dress. "Yes, I'm fine, Lazen. How is Lord M? How is he? Tell me please. Take me with him. I want to see him. I need to see it," Victoria asked, almost pleading desperately, without ceasing to cry. "Majesty, I'm sorry, I don't know anything about Lord Melbourne. I barely heard about the incident, I came to see how you were," apologized Lazen. "Take me with him. I want to go with him. I have to see it," Victoria demanded almost hysterically. "Please, Majesty, you must calm down, please," Lazen said as she held her by the arms, trying to interpose between her and the bedroom door, while Victoria tried to go to the door. "Your Majesty, you must calm down. Majesty. Dina." And the last thing Lazen said in a shout, calling her by the affectionate appellation they used to call her as a child, something she had never done since Victoria became queen. She said it in her eyes and got Victoria to stop. Lazen do not understand. If he dies, I die. If he die, I don't want to live. Lord M is my life. I love him Lazen, I love him. I can't live without him. I'm so afraid of losing him, and now he can die for saving me. I don't want him to die. God, I don't want him to die. My love do not die, please. Exclaimed Victoria, weeping frantically, pouting as if she were a little girl, in a vision that broke the heart. Lazen and Scarrat were amazed, their expressions frozen in a rictus of surprise, then their faces showed their sadness and compassion when they saw Victoria broken with pain. Scarrat's cheeks ran with great tears, and she could hardly restrain himself from crying. Lazen's eyes were damp, and even a tear escaped her, but she quickly dried it. Her face was covered again with security and serenity, and she approached Victoria, and embraced her, caressing affectionately the queen's back. Victoria buried her face in Lazen's lap and continued to weep and pout. Easy, easy, my Dina, said Lazen reassuringly, speaking to her with the tenderness she spoke to when she was a lonely and sad child who had no friends and suffered from the absence of an almost indifferent mother, and the cruelty of her mother's lover, and found in Lazen something like a surrogate mother. Lord Melbourne will live, he will not die. How do you know? Victoria said in a voice muffled and broken by tears, without removing her face from Lazen's lap. Because he is a healthy and strong man, said Lazen, even though she herself thought it was only a half-truth, for though certainly he was relatively strong, he was not a Hercules either, and his habits of life were well known all over the world, like Don sitting on a chair in his library, after falling asleep drinking a lot. That did not invite over-optimism. Is not that right, Miss Scarrat? She asked with a meaningful glance at Scarrat. Yes. Yes, of course. The Prime Minister is a very strong and healthy man, do not have to worry, His Majesty, said Scarrat, too eager to please Lazen and reassure Victoria, trying to sound optimistic, despite her nerves. Besides, God will care of him, I'm sure. Have faith, Dina, have faith. Lazen said to her, and then it separated a little to Victoria to see her to the face. Now you must change clothes, we have to undress and to verify that you are well. Besides, do not you want to see Lord Melbourne being presentable? He will like to see you are well, you are the queen, and he would want in this difficult time you carry yourself with all your dignity and majesty. We must to clean you and wash your face so they do not see that you have cried so much. Now you cannot leave because the guards are still checking the palace, but I promise you, when we will undress you, I'll go and see Lord Melbourne and I'll come and inform you, Lazen concluded. Will you do it, Lazen? Victoria asked a little more calmly, but still crying, with the gesture of a small wounded puppy. Of course, Your Majesty, replied Lazen, recovering the formal tone. Now we will remove those clothes from you and to clean to you. Quickly Lazen and Scarrat proceeded, removed clothes to Victoria, which remained motionless and allowed to act as if it were a doll, while she continued to cry, but now in silence. When Victoria was left in her underwear and barefoot, the Queen fixed her eyes on the suit she had been taken from, lying on the floor, the dress that had Melbourne blood stains. It's his blood, Victoria said, her voice weak and choppy, with a disturbed expression. Lazen turned her concerned gaze from the Queen's face to her dress and then back to Victoria's face, then she turned to see Scarrat. Miss Scarrat, take that dress to the kitchen and have it burned right away, and then come back with tea for the Queen, Lazen ordered. Yes, Baroness. Scarrat replied and hurried to pick up the dress, and went to the door, but just opened, she heard the voices of those who were approaching. Madam, the mother of the Queen and the King of Belgium are approaching, warned Scarrat. Just what was missing? Exclaimed Lazen without restraint, and then went to the door. Scarrat, stay with the Queen and you remove her the rest of the clothes. We should put her in the bath. I'm coming. Lazen went out into the hall and pulled the guard soldiers away to meet the Queen's mother and uncle. How's Victoria? The Duchess of Kent asked anxiously. Do not worry, she is fine, it's not hurt, now she's naked, let's give a bath to relax her, she's very nervous, Lazen replied. So I cannot see her? Asked King Leopold I, Victoria's uncle. It is not possible, Majesty, as I said she is naked, and she is still very nervous, Lazen replied, wishing in her mind that this unwelcome king should go to hell. I'm going to see her. Victoria's mother said distressed. Of course your highness. Lazen replied, even if deep down I would have wanted the Duchess to vanish in the air, let me go with you, and after I have left everything ready, and the Queen in your company, I will go and see how Lord Melbourne follows, to inform the Queen. Lord Melbourne? Asked the Duchess and the King, almost in unison. Do not you know? Lord Melbourne was wounded in the incident, apparently protecting the Queen, Lazen told them. No. We don't know much. We came back from a walk and heard that they had attacked the Queen, we came quickly to know that they had taken her to her bedroom, we did not know the details, replied King Leopold bewildered. Is it very serious? I don't know, Your Majesty. With your permission, she replied to the King, we go Your Highness, let us go with the Queen, Lazen said, addressing the Duchess. When Lazen and the Duchess entered the bedroom, Scarlett was covering to the naked Victoria with a somewhat transparent bathrobe. When the eyes of the mother and the daughter crossed, Victoria burst into tears again. Oh, Mama! Victoria exclaimed like a little girl frightened and broken with pain. My little Dina! Said the Duchess, who ran to embrace her daughter, who wept disconsolately in her arms. Lazen gestured for Scarlett to come closer and she spoke to her in a low voice. Miss Scarlett, go take the dress to the kitchen as I said, and come back with tea for the Queen and the Duchess, I'll go and see how Lord Melbourne follows. After saying it, Lazen slid out of the bedroom and Leopold spoke to her. Allow me to go with you. I want to know how Lord Melbourne is, said the King. Of course, Majesty, said Lazen, resigned, thinking if there is no choice. Elsewhere in the palace, outside a guest bedroom, Lord Alfred waited anxiously. At his side was Penge, attentive to what was happening. Both saw Lazen and King Leopold approaching. Lord Alfred, Mr. Penge. Lazen said with a slight nod. How is Lord Melbourne? Asked her. It's wrong, but the doctors are with him at the moment. I hope they can do something for him, Lord Alfred replied. Lord Alfred, pardon me, could you tell me exactly what happened? King Leopold interjected. The Queen and Prime Minister were in their audience, and I was waiting nearby for to go with Lord Melbourne to Parliament. Then I heard a firing, and a cry from Lord Melbourne, asking for help because they wanted to kill the Queen. I ran and found myself to that man, who had fired at them. Lord Melbourne protected the Queen with his body, on top of hers, and thus prevented the firing from reaching her. Lord Alfred explained. OMG! Lazen escaped, distressed at the thought of the danger that her beloved Victoria had run. After this good man, continued Lord Alfred, pointing to Penge, and I quarrelled with the attacker, and we managed to reduce him until the guards arrived and arrested him. Thank you Lord Alfred. Lazen said, taking Lord Alfred's hand in an unusual gesture in her, usually cold and distant with everyone, except with Victoria. She moved by gratitude to those who saved her beloved girl child. Thank you Mr. Penge. She said after taking Penge's hands. You're welcome, Penge replied, embarrassed by the gesture of his rival Lazen, with whom he had a strained relationship. Yes, thank you gentlemen. You are very brave, said King Leopold, unaccustomed to thanking anyone. What I did is nothing next to what Lord Melbourne did. The Queen is alive because of his courage and sacrifice. And perhaps he will pay with his life to save that of Her Majesty, said Lord Alfred, barely holding back his emotion, the suffering for his great friend. We are all indebted to him. He is a good man, noble and brave, exclaimed Lazen with sincerity and emotion, forgetting the reluctance she felt for him. for the infatuation of her little Victory for him. Yes, of course. We owe him. Leopold reluctantly acknowledged that he felt a real dislike for the impertinent Prime Minister whom he saw as an obstacle for his plans to marry his niece Victoria with the prince of his choice, but if the Prime Minister is dying. King Leopold saw the glances of reproach and anger of all, of Lazen, Penge and especially of Lord Alfred, is being debated between life and death. Rectified, who is in charge of the government? I've already sent messengers to the office of Prime Minister, so that the rest of cabinet ministers will be informed of what has happened. One of the ministers will temporarily assume the functions of Prime Minister, with cabinet agreement, and as long as Her Majesty the Queen decides what to do, said Lord Alfred, overpowering his anger, and pitied Lord Melbourne for stoically enduring this meddlesome and arrogant German prince, who had been converted by pure luck into king of a small, artificial kingdom created by chance, by a revolution. But should not it? The king was going to keep saying, but the door to the guest bedroom opened and the Queen's doctor came out, and no one paid any attention it. How is Lord Melbourne, doctor? Asked Lord Alfred, afraid. He's alive, and that's enough. He is bad, I'm afraid, Lord Alfred, but we don't give up. The colleagues that I sent for and me agree, and we're going to operate him. I don't want to deceive them, it is quite likely that he will die today. The doctor saw Lord Alfred's expression of pain, of Lazen's horror, of Penge's consternation and of Leopoldo's face of circumstances, but there are also good opportunities for he to live. I dare not give guarantees of a result. Now if you allow me, I must go back to operate. I will need more clean sheets and hot water. Right away, said Penge and went to give orders to the servants. Well, madam, gentlemen, said the doctor, turning to return to the bedroom. Doctor. If you allow me, Lazen said, and the doctor turned to look at her. The Queen asked me to convey her deep concern for the life of Lord Melbourne. There are not enough words to express the sadness of the Queen for the present state of Lord Melbourne, and the desire she feels for to save life him. And she asked me to convey to you, that she will be indebted to you forever if you saves his life, said Lazen, hiding under her ice mask the deep emotion that she felt as she verbalized the feelings of her beloved Victoria, and knowing what it would be like for her to lose Melbourne. King Leopold could not avoid a grimace of anger and displeasure, which went unnoticed. The doctor and Lord Alfred only attended to the figure of Lazen, erected as spokesman for the concern of her young mistress for the man who was fighting for his life. You can tell the Queen that I will do everything in my power and more, answered the doctor. Thank you, doctor, replied Lazen. A few minutes later, Lazen was again in front of Victoria's bedroom door, and sighed before entering. As she did so, Victoria, who was sitting on her bed in a bathrobe and her hair still damp from the swift bath that had taken place, rose to her feet. Her mother, who was sitting in an armchair, also stood, and Scarrat, who was picking up the Queen's clothes, in a corner, turned to see Lazen. The old governess of the Queen felt the weight of the eyes of the three women on her, expectant, and in the case of Victoria with deep pain and fear drawn on her face. And so, Lord M, is it okay? Victoria asked with tears peeping into her eyes, her whole body trembling and with the gesture of one who fears to receive the news of the death of the most beloved being in the world. He's alive, Majesty. Lazen began to answer, determined not to lie to her beloved Victoria, but at the same time wanting to be careful not to do her any more harm. The doctors are with him, at this moment they are operating. Operating? Victoria asked in a broken voice, and terror again appeared on her face as pale as a dead. But then, will it be okay? Please, tell me the truth, Lazen. The doctor told me that there is a good chance he will survive, but also... Lazen cut himself off, searching for strength and words so as not to hurt Victoria's heart. But also, what? Victoria asked almost in a whisper. It's also likely, that he dies today, ma'am, Lazen said, trying to keep her composure and her image cold, but she could not help but break her voice at the end, aware of the pain she was causing Victoria. Victoria gasped, then collapsed, fainting. Her mother and Lazan rushed on her, kneeling on the floor, and while the Duchess was crying and raising her Victoria's head calling her, Lazan was shaking her by the shoulder. "Get help! Let them send one of the doctors on the ground floor. Hurry up!" Lazan almost shouted at Scarrat. Scarrat picked up her skirt and ran off, and so, as Victoria lay on the unconscious floor, on one side of the palace, on the other side of the ancient building, Lord Melbourne was struggling for his life, he lying on a bed, and while they were operating it, in the dreams that came to him in his tormented unconsciousness, a single image came to him, that of Victoria.